The beekeeper steps into the apiary on a warm July morning, expecting the familiar hum of activity. But something feels different. The hives are quieter than they should be. The supers, those wooden boxes stacked above the brood chamber where bees store surplus honey, are lighter than expected. The frames inside show patches of capped honey, but far less than what should have accumulated by midsummer. The bees are still there, moving across the comb, tending to their work. But the honey production has slowed to a crawl, or stopped altogether, and the beekeeper, standing in the Georgia heat, wonders what went wrong. This pattern repeats across apiaries throughout Georgia each summer. Hives that were thriving in spring suddenly shift into a state that puzzles even experienced beekeepers. The bees appear healthy. The queen is laying. Foragers are flying. But the honey stops coming. Understanding why requires looking beyond the hive itself, into the rhythms of the landscape and the invisible forces that govern when bees produce surplus honey and when they do not. Honeybees collect nectar not because they intend to share it with humans, but because they need fuel. A colony requires enormous amounts of carbohydrates to survive. Nectar, once processed and stored as honey, becomes the energy reserve that sustains tens of thousands of bees through seasons when flowers are scarce. Foraging bees visit blooms, sip nectar, and return to the hive where house bees receive the load, reduce its moisture content through enzymatic action and evaporation, and seal it in wax cells. This is honey. But bees only produce surplus honey, the kind beekeepers can harvest, when nectar is abundant enough that the colony's immediate needs are met and exceeded. When that abundance disappears, so does the surplus. In Georgia, spring is a season of botanical generosity. Tulip poplars unfurl their green and orange blooms across the canopy. Black locust trees drip with fragrant white clusters. Clover carpets, pastures, and roadsides. Blackberry thickets explode with small white flowers. These plants bloom in succession, creating what beekeepers call a nectar flow, a period when floral resources pour into the landscape faster than bees can collect them. Colonies expand rapidly. Foragers work from dawn to dusk. The supers fill with honey. This is the season when beekeeping feels effortless, when the hive's productivity seems limitless. But as summer deepens, that abundance vanishes. By late June or early July, the spring bloom has ended. The tulip poplars have set seed. The clover has been mowed or dried out. The blackberries have fruited and withered. What remains is a landscape in waiting. The fall blooms, goldenrod and asters, are still months away. In between lies a stretch of weeks when very little flowers. This gap in floral resources is known as a nectar dearth, and it is the primary reason honey production stops suddenly in Georgia. The dearth is not a failure of the environment. It is a natural feature of the region's ecology. Plants do not bloom continuously. They time their reproduction to coincide with pollinators, favorable weather, and seasonal cues. In the southeastern United States, the hottest months often correspond with the fewest blooms. Heat stresses plants. Rainfall becomes irregular. Many species retreat into dormancy or focus energy on seed production rather than flowering. For the bees, this means the landscape that once offered endless opportunity now offers almost nothing. When nectar stops flowing into the hive, the colony's behavior shifts immediately. Foragers still leave the hive, but they return with less. House bees continue processing what little nectar arrives, but there is no surplus to store. The colony begins consuming the honey it accumulated during the spring flow. This is exactly what the bees stored it for. Honey is survival. The dearth is the reason the surplus existed in the first place. The bees are not failing. They are doing precisely what evolution prepared them to do. Beekeepers sometimes interpret this sudden halt as a problem with the hive. They inspect for disease, check for pests, evaluate the queen. But often, the hive is fine. The issue is not inside the wooden boxes. It is outside, in the fields and forests that no longer bloom. The colony is responding to environmental signals that the beekeeper may not immediately perceive. The landscape has entered a lean season, and the bees have adjusted accordingly. Research into honeybee foraging behavior shows that colonies are extraordinarily sensitive to floral availability. Foragers communicate the location and quality of nectar sources through the waggle dance, a figure-8 movement performed on the comb that encodes distance and direction. When abundant nectar sources are available, dances are frequent and vigorous. When resources decline, the dances slow, then stop. The colony reallocates labor. Fewer bees forage. More bees focus on brood care, hive maintenance, and temperature regulation. The hive does not shut down, it recalibrates. This recalibration has consequences for honey production. Even if some nectar is available during the dearth, it is often just enough to meet the colony's daily needs. The bees consume what they collect. There is no surplus to cap and store. To the beekeeper, it appears that honey production has stopped. In reality, production continues, but it is being consumed as quickly as it is made. The visible accumulation of honey in the supers ceases, and the hive's weight plateaus or even declines. The timing and severity of the dearth vary across Georgia. In the northern counties, where elevation and rainfall patterns differ, the dearth may be shorter or less intense. In the coastal plain, where heat and drought are more pronounced, the dearth can stretch for 2 months or longer. Urban and suburban areas sometimes fare better than rural ones, not because cities are inherently richer in nectar, but because landscaping introduces non-native plants that bloom on different schedules. Crepe myrtles, vitex, and cultivated gardens can provide scattered resources when native plants are dormant. But even in cities, the dearth is real. Some beekeepers respond by feeding their colonies during the dearth. Sugar syrup, a mixture of table sugar and water, can replace nectar and keep the colony from starving. But feeding does not restore honey production. Bees will convert syrup into stored carbohydrate, but the result is not honey in the traditional sense. It lacks the floral complexity, the enzyme activity, the terroir that defines real honey. Feeding sustains the colony, but it does not resolve the ecological gap that caused the dearth. Understanding the dearth shifts how beekeepers think about their role. The goal is not to force continuous production, but to manage colonies in rhythm with the landscape. This might mean harvesting honey in late spring or early summer, before the dearth begins, rather than waiting for fall. It might mean accepting that some months yield nothing. It might mean recognizing that the hive's health is not measured solely by the weight of the supers, but by the colony's ability to navigate seasonal extremes. The dearth also highlights the importance of forage diversity. Landscapes, dominated by a single crop or a narrow range of plants, are more vulnerable to resource gaps. Agricultural intensification, where large areas are devoted to monoculture, can create environments where bloom periods are brief and dearths are prolonged. Suburban sprawl, with its preference for turfgrass over wildflowers, reduces forage availability. Conservation efforts that restore native plants, protect hedgerows, and maintain diverse plantings help buffer colonies against the dearth. The bees need not just blooms, but blooms across time. Scientists studying pollinator health increasingly recognize that resource continuity matters as much as resource abundance. A landscape that provides massive nectar flows for 2 weeks, then nothing for 2 months, is less supportive than one that offers moderate resources continuously. Efforts to extend bloom periods through habitat restoration and strategic planting can reduce the severity of dearths and improve colony resilience. This benefits not only managed honeybees, but wild pollinators that face the same seasonal challenges. The phenomenon of honey production stopping suddenly in Georgia is not a mystery, it is ecology. It is the predictable result of a temperate climate, a diverse but seasonally constrained flora, and the evolutionary biology of an insect that stores food to survive lean times. The bees are not broken. The beekeeper is not at fault. The landscape is simply following its own calendar, and the hives are responding as they always have. For the beekeeper standing in the July heat, the quiet hive is not a signal of failure. It is a reminder that beekeeping is a negotiation with the natural world, not a command over it. The honey will return when the goldenrod blooms in September, when the asters open in October. Until then, the bees wait, and so does the keeper.